Okay.
Oh my God! I was telling you in the message. I watched you and Steve
Mm,
and Evan Strong. We had them on the show. They're wonderful people.
mm.
But yeah, that was such an impressive presentation you gave. That PowerPoint presentation. Was that just for the book? Was that just related to the book, The New Human, or was that some other material as well?
Well, I need you to remind because I put two out very recently, so I
Okay.
need to be clear which one it was, just as a reminder.
Okay. So
But
it was one where you had a bunch of slides. There was a lot of aqua or bluish, but in the background. This one had quite a bit of evidence, and the talking points, for instance, were these children, and you would put up a slide of one of the children and some of the remarks in regard to him. But there was a lot of other information in it too. There was a lot of information.
yeah,
Yeah, I did.
um,
I was a bit embarrassed, and I don't like normally do like background research, and I just do too many shows. But God, I just was like because I've watched you on some of the shows on Netflix or Amazon Prime, but I'd never seen a presentation like that. I thought that was just really good. I mean, you really covered everything and really did it like in 45 minutes. So it was very concise.
I've learned to be concise, Todd. But the thing is, with the children, there is so much information. I can literally put out a whole host of how they are different, how awake they are, and the information that comes through. Um, but I try and do a mix of leading people down the rabbit hole a little bit because I want to offer, some science as well. I
Right.
want to offer some grounding because it's really important. One of the things that I've focused on a lot has been the DNA because there's so much evidence in the DNA that is telling us more of who we are. So if you've got that as your baseline and the fact that the evidence is there that we've been intelligently created, then everything stems from that, who we are as hybrids, because we're all hybrids.
Right. Right.
It amuses me when you get certain researchers and people saying, "Oh, these hybrids coming in, they're coming to take over the planet."
We
And,
are the planet. We're the
and
mutts.
well, my answer to that is we already have because we're all hybrids and we have taken over the planet. So, what's the problem? The fact that they are upgrades of that
Yeah.
shouldn't be a concern because we need to be. We need to be more aware of everything that's going on. And the only way to do that is not certainly by listening to mainstream news or what you're educated into, which is, of course, a program and limited at that and inaccurate. And the more that anyone wakes up to this, the more they realize that. And then you have to start digging into the truth and finding the truth for yourself. So for me, the DNA is very significant because we're only coming to find out. And I've put together a whole thing just on the DNA, which explains not only that it's been altered and changed and the sources of that, but also there's a second code written over the top of the main DNA, which is coming out, which they don't yet know exactly the significance of that. People need to know also that 1 gram of DNA can fit in enough information that's on the internet in 1 gram of DNA, for example.
Yeah.
So we've got this amazing. Oh, and the other thing that's so significant is the Russian research that shows that DNA works with miniature wormholes. In other words, it creates miniature wormholes that allow us to access other realms, other realities, other timelines, because that's how we get our intuition, our knowing, our sensing, our feeling is through that ability of the DNA to um, access other realms. So it's like they create miniature wormholes, literally.
Wow.
So And then top of that, you have got the fact that we're not just DNA determined. And that's all the epigenetics, where you've got
Right.
Dr. Lipton, who's
Right.
saying our beliefs will control what the DNA expresses
Right.
because it's intelligent in itself. So if you believe, for example, even if you know that you've got a predisposition to, I don't know, cancer or something, if you believe that enough, you're going to manifest that because of the predisposition, but you don't have to.
Right.
If you actually look at the belief as being a possibility, but not set in stone, as it were,
Right.
then you don't necessarily have to express that particular gene at all. It's all about belief. So your belief alters what could be expressed in your DNA.
Yeah.
So you've got all these factors that show the magnificence of what DNA is. And we have the dormant DNA, of course, don't we? We're told that 90% is dormant. They don't know what it is, junk DNA and all the rest of it. When in fact, the truth is that that's what we are not yet recognizing as our extraterrestrial component. It's being activated, and that's why people are starting to get memories of being Pleiadian or Arcturian or from Orion or whatever, and bringing in all these abilities, because that's all encoded in that DNA as well. So you've got that coming in, and also what people don't know is the 223 genes is a sideways insertion of genetic material that scientists can't explain, that created Homo sapiens sapiens with twice the brain size and higher psychological functioning.
223 DNAs? Genes.
No, genes that are a sideways insertion of genetic material that the scientists can't explain, that we went from Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal, missing link, Homo sapiens sapiens, twice the brain size,
Right.
with 223 genes that are all to do with higher psychological functioning.
Is
That
this
is how,
is this traced to that period that's brought up, like between 130 and 200,000 years ago? Like where they see the...
they don't say when they were aware that we had these extra genes added. They don't say that. I'm giving you the bare bones. I go into it in a quite more detail in my book, because I think it's really important for people to realize there's something about the DNA that we're still not fully understanding. I mean, for example, with epigenetics, I give the example of a lovely gentleman who was in horticulture. I haven't got his name to hand, but I've got it in one of my presentations, where he's got cactus, and he keeps saying to the cactus, you don't have to defend yourself against me, because I'm not going to harm you. So he's telling the cactus time and time again, you don't need your spines. You don't need your spines because I'm not going to harm you. He ends up growing cactus without spines.
Wow. See, and that's much bigger than, I guess what? Directly influence our own body. It's out.
Yes.
It's
yes.
it's outside of us now.
It's consciousness.
Yes.
All of these are clues to the potential that we have and are. All of it is showing us how our thoughts and our intent have a frequency and have an energy that is magnificent.
Yeah. So, God, the DNA was a part of that presentation that I saw. It was very impressive. And I watched a couple other things too at the same time. I watched one on another podcast, and they were talking about consciousness. Like, what exactly is consciousness? And it just all kind of merged with what you were talking about in regard to the DNA, because that's a physical quality, right? Yeah. And so I watched that. And one of the things that came up, there's a lady named Gigi Young, and she has a YouTube channel, and she's been active, Starseed active, for 10 years. And she's been very consistent as she uses her own research and her own guidance. And then she puts out what she puts out. One of the things she's been putting out lately is a series called the Mars Myth. And the basis of her presentation is that, now stay with me on this because it's not like totally a human kind of a perspective. The basis is that there's an implanted storyline that we had been manipulated, or else, let me put it this way. We had been created totally 100% that she feels is false. Not that literally some of this stuff didn't happen or that there wasn't alterations, but that the human species, I guess in a way, is kind of like all species, that it's self-determining, self-regulating, really the same qualities that you were talking about. Having what you're kind of brought in with, but also having the ability to change things as you go through the process that you're talking about. And I don't think that she's throwing rocks at it. I mean, I think she's saying, hey, this is really about consciousness, and so this story is being presented so that ultimately you can be offered a one world religion. It's kind of, we're going to, so that's her kind of thought behind it. The only reason I brought it up is because of the second part of what you said, which was given the DNA that we know of or don't know of or whatever, that structural and even that second layer, because I want to talk about that. We still have the power in the present to create from this point forward. So it almost makes it a moot point. But what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like we were 100% created, or that there was some level of, and I know it gets kind of weird because here's the soul, here's the biology, the vessel. But do you think that we were 100% created, or, which I guess ultimately at some point we were, but you know what I mean, by the star family, or do you think that we were here and they added or modified our genetics?
If we look at Neanderthal, Cro-Magnon, and many others, Denisonians and all these other ones that apparently are offshoots, I suspect there was an indigenous, to start with, of various types of humanoid, and they then chose one particular one to utilize for the added DNA. One of the interesting things that an 8-year-old told me when she was up on the craft, apart from showing her how to use her abilities, they showed her genetic engineering, and they said, this is what we do. We mix species and then we seed other planets. So it may be that initially they even create the indigenous species, see which one fares best in that environment, and then saying, well, the one that survives the best is this one. This is the one we'll upgrade. And it may be like, because that's what she was saying really, was that this is what they do. They seed star systems,
right?
Other planets, not just in this particular reality, but other galaxies as well. So that's part of what they do. And I think one of the main species for that is the master geneticist, the mantis.
The mantis
are considered the master geneticists. And they seem to have these stores of different genetic lines and they will decide, well, for this particular ecosystem, one is most likely to survive. So that wouldn't surprise me that's how it happened.
Yeah. It's, and again, like the soul's here, and the multidimensional aspect part of us, I guess the human part of it is here. So I try to look at it both ways, but it sounds like almost like at a soul level, or with, let's say, higher self or soul involvement with the whole group, that we create I guess in a way create everything, really, the planets, and we create the populace of the planet, or what's on the planet. Because I remember listening to, now that I remember some of what you were saying, that they were saying something along the lines of what you just said, and that they determine what species is most hospitable, or will be taken on most hospitably from that planet, based on their history. Yeah, I remember that part of it. That was very interesting. You,
Yeah.
you talked about I think you used the word overlay, like that there was the basic genetics or DNA, and then you're saying that, if I heard you correctly, scientists are finding another layer.
Yeah. And they're saying we don't understand yet what this means, in terms of that. I'd need to pull out the actual slide and the scientists that were talking about this, but they do say there's another layer. They're not sure what that means, and what it means as in terms of us as being human. But on top of that, we're looking at the soul choosing the vehicle that is most suitable for their incarnation as well. So they've got to have a vehicle that fits in with their frequency, because one of the biggest things that starseeds struggle with is the density of the planet and the
Right.
density of their physical body. And, but what's happening with that is it's almost like the body, they have to have a certain amount of density
Right.
to operate down here. But as we know, what's happening now is, as the frequency of the planet rises and more awareness and the consciousness rises, also the body is being activated to a higher frequency as well. So it's almost like we're seeing this evolving of the human vehicle to suit the soul mission that's
Right.
come here.
Right. God, this is getting wild, isn't it? And I'd never heard anything about that before, but it reminded me of the New Earth grid. Like, hanging out with Morgan, I spent a lot of time going into the New Earth grid in the past year. And now she's doing it with groups. So, like 8, 10, 20 people. And it's really extraordinary because it's mostly silence. It's like a gathering. We put ourselves in an octahedron. We go over to the New Earth grid, and we just kind of see what happens. And it's extraordinary, some of the things that are happening and what people are experiencing, even though they may explain it a little different. People are seeing a lot of the same things. And one of the things that I know others have seen and I've seen is where you had the present day grid, and it may be collapsing and breaking apart, but there was another grid that kind of overlaid and presented and is, I guess, coming into an embodiment on the earth. And I just look at that experience and that description along with what you're talking about, and, as within, without. I wonder, is this new overlay of DNA a new thing?
Well, they're saying they hadn't been aware of it until they'd done more research, and obviously have the technology to explore it more and more. Interestingly, I remember in my statement from Dr. Crick, the co-founder of the DNA molecule, he was the Nobel Prize winner, and he said that they had programmed something into human DNA that when we reached a certain level of awareness, and I stroke technology, we will find out more of what that is. What I think he was indicating was, once we have the technology to look into DNA on another level, we will see what we need to see. It'll tell us more about ourselves, he said. So what I'm seeing is almost an activation of the DNA. Is what's happening is we're seeing more
Right.
of what we are. And of course, as Dr. Lena Olson talks about the holographic side of DNA. So you've got that frequency that's holographic in the DNA as well. And that's probably connected to these wormholes, those miniature wormholes that we access. And you know how affirmations are so powerful and hypnosis is so powerful. What it's doing is, when you go into an altered state, and you take on those frequencies, those positive frequencies, it changes you. It
Yes.
changes you because it's literally altering the configuration of the DNA. And that's what the scientists in Russia were saying, is you don't have to slice out faulty genes. You just have to use the right human language, because it's all tied into human language.
Right.
The frequencies that affect DNA it's human language that affects them. It's actually like a human language.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Because, like I was getting in the last week, it was just collective coming in, but it was like, I'll explain it my way, but like, I understand that I'm the projector. It had to do with the holograph, and it had to do with, you guys have gotten to a point now where you can actually create, consciously create the projection. So it's along the same lines, I guess, on a more expanded level of programming DNA, which is what I'd like to get into, because there has been a lot of talk. I mean, Morgan taught me to play with DNA when I met her 7 years ago, and I've seen other people have other versions of it. How simple or difficult is it to you to actually apply that and begin to reprogram ourselves?
Well, and I always am amazed at really how logical this is, that if we can actually alter the configuration of DNA by words and frequencies, and it has to be the right human language. Well, we know that, for example, a positive affirmation actually does make a difference, right, and does alter someone in their thinking and behavior. So if you take that, and if it's aligned to human language, why is it when somebody says something beautiful to us or kind to us, we feel better? That's not just we feel better. We are actually taking on that from a DNA level, and it's making us feel better because it's actually affecting the DNA.
Yeah.
And we don't realize how powerful words are. When you say, it's like beautiful music. It's a frequency. It's a frequency that is affecting DNA. And and all of this, positive frequencies, positive thinking, all of those are frequencies that are part of the human communication. And that is what is ultimately affecting our DNA. Once we realize the power of that, then what it's doing is empowering you. And on top of that, if you understand epigenetics, which Dr. Bruce Lipton explains so beautifully, is that the cell itself has an intelligence.
Right.
And that if your beliefs are positive frequencies, then that will also help to affect your DNA. So your beliefs matter. They really do matter. So with that, plus giving yourself, I think I'm a good person, or I have all the love I need, or whatever it is your affirmation for yourself, that is literally changing and altering how your DNA is constructed into a more harmonious mode, if you like.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have the cactus effect, which is like taking it to a whole different level. It's like you're going from elementary school to PhD level with the information, because now you're interacting with something external, which used to be something like, I remember as a young, early 20s, wanting to, make my way in business and having my first goal and going and making it happen after 15 or 20 no's, right? Or whatever. So that was like something I can see where that would work, like how that would apply. But now it seems to be like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, for instance, like in these little groups, there was 3 ladies that I know of. One that I know very well, and I know that she had a long history of some couple of acute health issues. that were really no joke. And one of these sessions we did, a part of it was focusing on something that you wanted to bring into healing or alignment. And, the next day the symptoms dropped after 10 years and nothing else has happened. So I see that part of it, right? And then there's the external part of it, like me and you playing today, or some of the stuff that happens with Morgan and I, that we can't consciously go, okay, I'm going to do this and you do that. It doesn't happen that way. It's almost like we're swimming in the water and we come out and the qualities of the water or the energy start to have some kind of effect on us too. Or maybe we attract it because we've changed or something. I don't know.
It's interesting that many of the new generations of starseeds talk about communicating with animals, and communicating with trees, communicating with crystals, and what have you. So all it's really saying is we're becoming more aware and conscious that we are part of a collective consciousness.
Right.
Which involves everything around us, because everything is energy and everything is made of the same stuff ultimately. And they're conscious of it. I mean, I don't know if I mentioned to you a wonderful veterinary surgeon in Chile who wrote to me. I'd done a session with her about a year ago. Since that time, she's opened up. And she said, Mary, I just want you to know that the pets now tell me what's wrong with them. And I tell their owners. And she said, and the ones that have died and passed on sometimes have a message for their owners as well that I pass on to them. So here is a veterinary surgeon who is now quite openly saying she communicates with the animals and she passes on the messages to those that come to the clinic from their pets. And this is now her norm. This is what she does.
Wow.
And she's not going to be the only one. This is the interesting thing is, a lot have mentioned being animal communicators, but I've not come across a professional veterinary surgeon that's admitting it.
That's wild. That's like a Reiki master that picks up information when they're working on you. And so the involvement, or say the collaboration of the star family in terms of the retooling or reengineering or modification of our DNA. I saw on one of your slides, I think it was a girl talking about there were 12 races that seeded the Earth. I know Franco's intel, he always said that there were 12 contributors and that in some way we're bringing all 12 of those lineages into alignment, I guess. Do you think that there was a lot of different stuff going on around the Earth, or that it was a concerted effort with one uniform, like management group?
Well, we've heard of the Galactic Federation, for example, or the Council of Planets and all these. So often as not, on board craft, you'll see a mix of species. You won't just get a mantis. You might get a mantis, a humanoid. From a particular star system. You may get various zetas and what have you, felines or whatever. So it seems like there's been a collaboration, and the 12 came through from Dolores Cannon's work in Convoluted Universe. Command Sergeant Robert Dean, the wonderful ufologist who died a few years ago, bless him, admitted he'd been on board craft, and he explained finally, this is in his last few years of life, he said he'd been told there were 12 different species that had created Homo sapiens sapiens. He also said he's seen the future and it's glorious for humans. That was one of the things he said, that in the future we will get to the point we all hope to get to.
Right.
Others that have come through that have been given information or been shown information, 12 seems to be very much the number, although others have come up and said there's even more. So maybe the later hybrids have had added DNA, because certainly some of those that are recognizing the fact they're hybrids, have often been told they've had extra DNA from a particular species added.
Right.
And this may be to bring in new qualities of awareness, because they seem to come from not just this galaxy, but interdimensionally as well. So they're coming in with their own particular frequency, their own particular awareness, because obviously it's needed for certain things on the planet. Some are dealing with ecology, some are dealing with working with the elements. I mean, a number of children have talked about working with the elements. And I always remember this 10-year-old explaining to his mum, and he was on Glastonbury tour, which is, you know, for those who know Glastonbury, the tour itself, where King Arthur was supposed to have his court. And he was up there and it was really windy. And he just said to his mum quite casually, this wind has just told me it came from Italy. So he was aware of the origin of that.
Good gosh.
Element, you know. So, you know, you can take that or not, but some have talked about being able to control elements, you know, the different elements, the wind or whatever. And, you know, we know that certain magical practices, we know that certain of those that were considered witches or whatever, many of them were very in tune with the earth energies and all the rest of it. So to me, what we're now seeing is a real ownership of the fact we can connect to everything.
Yes. I mean, that to me, like, would probably do it for all of us if we actually saw the threads, the way everything's connected, would probably alter our behavior 100%. God, there's so much going on here. We just had earlier today a 16-year-old from England come on. We had a really nice conversation with her for an hour. And it wasn't like heavy galactic. I mean, she obviously had, sensitivities since day one. She's in a conscious household with parents and a sister. Very, very much has been on the path the last 3 years. What really intrigued me about her was the frequency that she carried. It was a frequency of power, but that same type of benevolence or heart that like our grandmothers had, right? And her explanations on things were so simple but profound. Like, what would you tell parents of the world? What do you think adults need to know? And she said, let children do what they want to do. Let their energy run free. You know, let them move towards what they want to move towards. So, I mean, they don't sound like really deep things, but they were. And it was delivered in such a way that I was just bombarded the whole hour by downloads. And here we go again. How many are there? How many women are stepping up? Like the second guest today, you know, who hid for years and then a year ago pulls out of a relationship, pulls out of a country, meets somebody else, and that's part of it. It was an individual journey, but meets a partner, now is in Florida, and everything is gone from one type of lifestyle to a totally different one a year later. But this is going on everywhere. Really. I mean, there's been a lot of talk, Mary, in the last few weeks about the solar flash again. And I know I said it. I know another friend of mine I was talking to, he said it. We've never really bought into it, like in a literal basis. But I have to say, the way things have been going recently, I wouldn't put it out of the question. Some people are even calling for it in the next 2 or 3 days. Are you feeling this ramping up of energy these last few weeks?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And my indicator is the numbers of people contacting me, you know, and a lot of the time it's like the lady you spoke about. They've kept quiet for years and years and years. And there's been something that's pushed them to say, I've just got to understand now. I've got to find out what this is all about. Because, I'm seeing things. Many of them talk about being almost followed by spacecraft, that every time they go outside, there's another craft there or whatever. And I come to the conclusion that often that happens. It's like the family saying, hi, we're here. When are you ready to wake up? I'm around. Hi, and it's been quite fascinating. Lots of different ways they'll try and activate that desire to understand. And of course, what is the biggest issue here on this planet is the fear. And that's bred into us, isn't it? This whole fear frequency of everything around us, and that's been ramping up, and that's often been a very big hurdle because of the fear of non-acceptance and judgment and being different. And with many of them, they've got professional lives, and there's a very deep concern that if they come out and start exploring this, that the whole world will change forever. And of course it's meant to.
Right.
The bottom line is it's meant to.
Exactly.
We can't keep going down the same road saying, oh, well, it's not really me. It's, you can do it. I'm not ready. And I'm just saying, but, we sometimes need our back against the wall before we actually do something.
I bet you a lot of people would agree with that in their own right, in their own case with themselves. But, more than anything, I mean, there's a lot of interesting narratives. This solar energy or whatever's been coming down the last 6 weeks has just been crazy. I mean, every day the Schumann's doing something. But overall, to me, especially the last 3-4 days, it just feels like there's a major frequency change. And like the frequency itself is starting to be felt. What I mean by that is, and again, going back to what's easy to go back to, you could look at the elections you're having, or you could look at Joe Biden, or you could look at COVID, or not look at it anymore because it seems to be here one day, gone the next. But it's like these things just aren't being supported. They're just not working. And so like I see overall everything that the frequency itself is the dominant momentum, I guess I would say. And this whole thing is very intriguing, I think, and very important in this self-talk, the affirmations, Dr. Emoto's work, you're talking about Bruce Lipton, but this, not to underestimate the simple, because it's such a simple nature action to talk to yourself, and I know all of us do, but like we could actually do this as a lifestyle and really accelerate things, I would think, because it feels like we're accelerating things already, but I mean, this is really basic stuff when you think about it. Powerful, but very basic.
I'm very happy to put a few slides together with the basics of how this works, because I can do that with you. I mean, I've got it more or less there, which I've put together for my own interest, is all these different points.
Right.
The thing is that's important here, and why, for me it's important that I engage my scientific left brain side to understand the mechanics of something.
Right.
For me, that's always been extremely important. I've got to know the baseline here in terms of the tangibility of it, and that's been necessary for me. And I do know a lot of people need that baseline to work from, so they can see how it then leads you down the rabbit hole, if you like. And that's been what I've done with the DNA. So I can do that next time if you like.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Put that together.
Yeah.
Because if people understand how it works from a very 3D scientific point of view and the evidence for it, then it's a lot easier then with your belief to work with the belief then, because you've got that substance to work from that says, here you've got it. This is actually how it works. You can see it very tangibly. And then you can then start to say, well, now what are the implications of that? The implications are, this is how it all works. And for me, it sort of balances things out a little bit between my left and right brain. I can sort of say, right, I've got the evidence here that makes sense. Now I can see how that works. That's why affirmations are so powerful, for example. You know, I was saying, if you've been, they say, give the child to us till they're 7, and after that you can do anything you like, which was the Jesuits always saying that, because up to 7, you're uncritical of any kind of thing you're told. You absorb it, you take it on board, because up to that point there's no left brain critique. So if you're told you're stupid at 3 or 4 or 5, you're going to believe that the rest of your life, unless you question it. When you get to 7, you start to edit, you start to question. So after that time, then, you know, you can start working things out. So if you go back, and I've worked with a lot of people, highly intelligent, often professionals, that will say, but I just think I'm stupid, you know, or whatever. And it's gone back to maybe when they were at school and somebody or the teacher said, you're a really stupid girl or whatever. So what you have to do, because that's a program that you've taken on uncritically because you were only 5 years old, you have to then erase that program. And the way you do it is through affirmations. So instead of that being part of your tape, you then, if you say that enough to yourself, the opposite to that, you then erase the tape and then you release it. And that's what you're doing, is doing that to your DNA. Right. Because the DNA is taking the frequency, you're stupid, you're stupid, you're stupid. And it arranges itself into that belief that you're stupid. But you can erase that and reconfigure it with the frequencies that say the opposite to that. So I would say to someone, right, what do you want to tell yourself about yourself that's true, that you know is really true? And they'll say, well, because I'm amazing, I can do anything I want to do. Right, that's on your fridge. Every day, every time you see that on your fridge, you say out loud, this is who I really am. Give it a few weeks and you will have done what you've needed to do to change that program. It's not rocket science.
That's what I'm saying. It's introduced in a lot of modalities, and it can therefore seem like it's maybe a bit complex or something that's, you know, comprehensive enough that it takes a while. But it works with plants. It works with animals. Yeah. It works. Exactly. It works with other people. I mean, once we get past all the program, I mean, you know what? It also, you know, a lot of times I'll say, and I hear other people say, this is bigger than all this. It's happening anyway. So, you know, and now I'm going, wait a minute. That's kind of like taking that, at least I'm putting it over here on the side going, let me think about this for a second. Because is this being forced on us? Or are we regulating it ourselves? Which now I'm thinking, and I've always felt like it was somewhat mutual, but yeah, really, why would the universe do anything for us? That's pretty much how it works, isn't it? I mean, nobody gets anything for free. You know, you have to jump into the fray to have the experience. So that would make sense to me that, you know, if a solar flash was going to come in 2-3 days, it's because everybody got to the point, or whatever the story is, right? I mean, it's regulated by us, I guess is what I'm saying.
And also the other thing that to add to that is when you talk about Masaru Emoto and how you can program water by your prayers, music, or whatever. We're 70% water. Yeah. So there we have it. And when you have a 9-year-old telling you that she can heal water with her thoughts, and this is a little girl in Sweden that told me that she could, and her mother said when her daughter sent her energy to the water, it tasted different. It actually tasted different. So her daughter was doing something. And again, all it's really saying is that she was using whatever her frequency was to rebalance the water that she was actually concentrating on. Well, Masaru Emoto's talked about that. He's talked about the fact that right music, affirmations, we're 70% water. Even if you look at that from just the water angle,
Exactly.
what do you need? It's sending it the frequency to heal yourself, to be in harmony and balance. We can do it for ourselves.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt at all. Have you heard anything else on the arcs?
Only that the lady that I did the regression with is getting more information, and it's all to do around Bermuda. It's all to do around that area where she said she's been shown that the frequencies of activating it, it's like remotely, she's being shown that they can be activated by consciousness. And she said, and that's what's unfolding for her. So perhaps with all the arcs, it is responding to all those star seeds that have come back this time to activate these arcs for what, the event? I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Here we go again. It's I can't. I remember on what was it, March 31st. I remember that day, and I remember seeing something that said there were 7 solar storms that day or something. And then every day since then, there's just this constant barrage of CMEs and solar flares and Schumann resonance and God knows what else. It just feels like it's taking. I don't mean taking us over as in controlling us, but like taking over. Like, and maybe it's us. I don't know what it is, but like the whole thing is changing, which we've been saying all along. But the level of change in the last couple of months has just been absolutely off the chart.
Well, I think on a consciousness level, we've orchestrated everything.
Yeah.
Because I see us as the creators of our experience.
Yes.
So we will, all the different things that we set up in our life to move us to another level of understanding, I believe is already set up by the soul before it incarnates. So it's got the tools it needs to. That makes sense to me anyway. That, we said, right, we're going to go on to this human journey for a while. We're going to, rattle the cage. And
rattle the cage. Get our cage rattled. Get our cage rattled. Yeah.
So I feel it's all set up.
So this is really like, I didn't know about that overlay DNA coming into the picture. I'll
send you the slide.
Yeah.
That particular slide that
okay.
has the science behind it.
I might have missed that one when I was watching it. But to me, it's like whatever's going on too, how is science going to be ignoring it much longer? I mean, how do you keep a cap on it? How do you keep a cap on what's happening to people all over the world? I mean, it's every practitioner I talk to, including today, is telling me more and more people are waking up. I'm getting more clients. I think you just said the same thing, actually.
Yeah. I think that what we're doing with the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute with Ray Hernandez and what he's put together, all these what I call open-minded scientists that are looking into consciousness, the near-death experiences, the out-of-body experiences, the shamanic experiences, they're all putting it under the umbrella of human consciousness as the science now that is really what we have to explore to understand fully human experience, which has still had that caveat of, modern psychology that still says that unless, everything comes from a physical reality and that anything beyond that is imagination or, or fantasy or whatever, we've still got this ridiculous way of trying to interpret human experience when people are going out of body, having lucid dreaming, visiting parallel realities, other dimensions. I'm hearing this all the time. And they'll say, I must be very strange and unusual for me to be telling you this, but this is my experience. And I'm thinking, no, mate, it's not, because I can tell you another half a dozen people that
Half a dozen. I listened. I listened to Stephen read your part of your bio, and again, I was a bit embarrassed because I thought, God, I didn't know all that, like about ACERN and your position in the ufology community, and just some different things. I did this. I said this to you before, but I was sitting there looking at it. I was watching it, and it was all in perfect timing and everything. It was just perfect. And I'm thinking to myself, God, she must be like going in her backyard and just jumping up and down, saying, "Finally, it's happening." I mean, I can't imagine you would have been the odd one out in the '90s. You know what I mean? I mean,
I was. The nuts and bolts of ufology always struggled with Mary, because Mary has always talked about the experience, okay?
Yeah.
And she's gone into the woo-woo land of, metaphysics and what have you. But I always saw the connection between metaphysics and ufology, in the sense it was all about a wake-up call to humanity,
Right.
on various levels. We needed to have the nuts and bolts, people seeing craft, being aware there's a cover-up, understanding that these intelligences are visiting and have been visiting for millennia. All of that was really important. But what was not being looked at by many UFO groups, some of it because they didn't have the expertise to look at the experiences. When experiences are you being visited in your bed by an energy being, for example, or being taken out the window and taken up on a craft and educated, or taken to other planets, or shown Mars or the moon and beings underneath there, and feeling that you were part of this family or whatever. Nuts and bolts ufologists don't like that,
Right.
because it's not tangible. It's not, they can't qualify that. They say, well, we can't prove that, and my way of proving that whatever they were experiencing was real, because of what they manifested and how they changed. And that was that they became more aware.
Yeah.
They became more conscious of what was important. They changed their diet. They changed the way that they looked at life, their philosophy. They were spiritually changed. They were becoming more multidimensionally aware. They were producing languages and scripts and artwork and music, all through this channel of openness that they had with their connection to whatever the intelligence was they were working with. But ufology didn't like that too much, because again, it stretches that 3D part of people who want to see just that piece of the craft,
Yeah.
if you like.
Well,
so I've been out there a lot in my life with this, but it's starting to come together now.
I'll say so. Yeah, it makes me wonder, because I've noticed that about what you're saying. Obviously, there's got to be some double agents in all the communities, but the ones that won't embrace the self-empowerment aspects of the story, I find that a bit questionable. Like, they're pushing a narrative versus pushing real truth and real curiosity.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, at the base, at the root of science, really, is you don't find out. You just find out more.
Yeah.
But I had an interesting episode about 3 days ago in one of these groups that Morgan does, and she actually had the same thing to a degree. I don't want to get into like the specifics because it is all metaphoric, but one of the things that I noticed, I actually went back in and tapped in, because when I went on this craft, it was the first time that I'd ever had an aspect that I walked into an aspect.
Yeah.
Like before they'd merge or they will walk into me. And I went back in and I was like, why is this going on? And what I was picking up, these aspects on this ship far into our, aspects of us far into the future, I guess, or something. It was along the lines of, where are we going to put the soul? What's going to house the soul? So when I was on the ship, I was basically left my body.
Yeah.
And my soul or my energy or whatever concept went into this vessel. And I noticed that all the vessels looked alike, a lot like, they didn't look like stormtroopers, but they were all uniform in their appearance. So you had to look at them a different way to actually see who they were, because they all looked the same on the outside. Anyway, I was reflecting on that a couple of hours ago, and I was like, no, that's interesting too, because there's all this all this worry about AI and and all that stuff. And then going back to what you're saying about, where does the physical part connect with the non-physical part that you brought to the table with the ufology group or community that they don't want to take? I mean, there's got to be an intersection there. And it seems like it's on the galactic side in many cases for people.
Yeah, and your experience of moving into another form, I've heard this numerous times. I always remember the first time was a lady, and she saw herself on the craft, but she was in a Zeta body.
Okay.
And she said, I'm a scientist on this craft. So I said to her, so where is your human body? And she said, oh, it's sort of over there, waiting for me. Almost like waiting, hanging on a hook almost. And I said, so how do you get from the Zeta vehicle body back to your human body? And she said, oh, she described a ball of light, which was her soul.
Okay.
Which floated over and reanimated her human body.
So
that, and the other one was an 8-year-old saying to me, his family were the mantis, that when he dies, he's going back to being a mantis. But when he was on board craft sometimes, he said, I evaporated into the mantis form. So he would be in the mantis form for a time until he wanted to come back down and be human. So he would then come back into his human. He called it evaporating, was how he described the expression. But this is something that is happening to many starseeds. If they need a different vehicle, like a different car to operate in a different environment, then the soul just moves out, inhabits it for whatever is needed, and then goes back to the human form when it's time to come back to Earth.
Right. Yeah. God. And these groups, again, I think this must, and it must be happening around the world. Like I saw another friend of mine, and she's been doing groups. And I'm not sure, it has to do with well, anyway, it's still all the same thing, right? I mean, they're traveling through the ethers together openly. And she was just put this up today, and she was saying, there's a lot of people doing groups out there and playing in the new energy and playing on the new Earth grid. And they're actually, what the download she was getting, she's pretty strong, was that these people were actually setting up the pathways for what will become time travel and other access points for the for the vast populace. To think that it's all rooted here is just really, it just supports everything you're talking about, and it's mind-blowing. It's really mind-blowing, considering you have a slide, and on that slide it talked about in percentages. It talked about people that had gone through, I think, an abduction experience or an encounter. And on a percentage level, I think you quoted some a minute ago, but it just talked about the different things that happen to people.
Yeah.
And the windows or the wormholes that they went through, I guess, in their own experience. Like, how do you put a cap on that? I just don't see how that's going to stop. Especially when, is it your experience that when people have these type of experiences that they walk away at a higher level of alignment typically?
Well, that's the whole purpose of it, is that we are challenging this present inaccurate reality that we've been programmed into, which is limited and limiting.
Right.
And we are now creating more of what is in alignment with our frequency and our soul purpose.
Yeah.
So we are now creating what we need for that expansion and for the collective of humanity as well, because we're coming in to help this whole consciousness of this planet to go to a higher level of expansion and awareness.
I don't know if I asked you this before. I know I asked somebody here recently that's in your I'd say in your league, you know, has your tenure, and I can't remember who it was, and God, are all, and I know it's just an opinion or a perspective, there's no right or wrong, but are all souls on Earth from somewhere else? Are there some souls, do you feel, that were originated here?
It's an interesting question. And I do know that one 10-year-old explained his mum had been a human many times, but it was his first incarnation on planet Earth. And there's been quite a few of the starseeds that have struggled because it is their first incarnation, and they found it very dense and very difficult. So, but when we look at, you know, some say the new souls or whatever, there may be some that originate from planet Earth, just like some of us may have originated in the Pleiades or Arcturus or another dimension or whatever. But you know, when we talk about new souls and older souls, maybe it's the older souls that have come and been many things, been in many places, and what have you. So it's one of this 9-year-old explained heaven to me in the sense of, she was saying it was Dayland, where she said where the ultra terrestrial lives and love and light lives with the angels, and we come from there. And she explained that we all chose to go to other frequencies, or, you know, to night land and whatever. And she was saying that what we're all doing as souls is we're helping each other upgrade. So in other words, you and I will be trying to help those that are waking up because of our awareness, and we've got sources that are helping us to get to that higher level. And it continues. It's not a hierarchy as such. It's just a level of awareness to get back to source. And what we're all doing is helping each other up that stairway to heaven, if you like, for want of a better word, or the source. Yeah. So, in other words, there are some of us that have been around the traps, probably being creator beings, have been in other dimensions, other life, many different types of life forms. I mean, the one little boy explained that he'd been there at the time of the dinosaurs. He'd also been a rabbit or a hare. So he remembers being a hare as well. So we've been all those forms as well, I think. Yeah. I honestly think we've been all different forms, and we've experienced it. And what we're doing is we're constantly expanding that understanding, that awareness, those experiences each time we incarnate. So for some, it might be the very first time they've been on planet Earth. Others have been here many, many times. But whether or not some have originated on Earth, I don't see why not. Any more than some may have originated on Mars or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean it's not really important, I guess, but it's just to curious minds, like in the way everything's set up too. I know that, people that might go by or identify with the Starseed Lightworker, they're not typically, they're coming with a lot of humility, and so I don't think they're always comfortable with, hey, there's a first wave and second, third wave, and everybody else is over here, or we're awake and everybody else is over here. But there does seem to be a like they say, like a ground crew, or a group that's got a specific mission to get us to the point that we seem to be at now.
The way that I've always seen it, Todd, is that we're all coming from the source,
right.
So we're all equal. It's just that some of us have done more than somebody else.
Right.
And that level of awareness means that that's what separates you out, is the level of awareness that you have given what you've experienced. So we're all there as equal in terms of the soul frequency or essence. But some of us have experienced more, therefore we can help those that haven't experienced as much to help them along the journey. So, when people talk about ascended masters and angels and whatever, there's not a hierarchy as such,
right.
in my way of understanding it, just that they've reached a certain level of awareness and understanding. And that's, all this business of venerating that
right.
is actually not what it's about. They're not seeking veneration. They're seeking you to acknowledge that they can help you and guide you, because that's been their role. But not in terms of the way that I think we've been inclined on this planet to treat anyone who has got more understanding, awareness, or has more. Somehow they're better than us,
or appears to. Because I've met plenty of lit people that are not in their body. Not taking anything away from anybody, but there's always another side to it. Sometimes being in touch with your human aspect is really the top priority, really. When you think about it, all that other stuff doesn't. Do you feel like something's imminent?
Yes.
Do you feel like that imminence is like in the next 2 or 3 months, or this year?
I would say this year, certainly. I feel something, because I'm Aries, so I want everything yesterday, and I've got to the point where I'm saying to the team, "Come on, guys, you're out. Start getting things moving. I'm done with this now. I'm done with this now. Start moving things along. I'm ready for you to move things along." So maybe that's just my wishful thinking, but there is a sense that we've reached, we're almost at a crossroads here where everything's going to shift. And we always knew it was going to be darkest before the dawn. And I think that, a lot of people are feeling that now. And I think that's going to tip the scales to everything.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, just the energy, like what you said to your team. I mean, we've all said that to our teams. And it's increased. But if you just take into consideration the energy of, a typical one of us, which is, I'm tired, let's, and that's got to have some power in it. Why would that be any different than anything else we impress upon the realm? So, I was just curious what you thought. Yeah, to me, it definitely feels like something's very imminent. I think it's going to be a very hot summer. And a very interesting fall, depending on where you're at. Spring, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere. I appreciate you, Mary. We all do. Everyone at Soulogy does. They love you coming on. And, I would love to do the slideshow with you if you're open to it. I think people would get a lot out of it. I was very impressed. And I can't watch anything for more than 5 minutes. And I watched about 90% of it. The part where you were presenting, because you had a talking period and before and after. But I thought it was very concise. It was very comprehensive and broad in what it discussed, even though it was in regard to the star family and ETs and our interactions. But it covered a lot of stuff. And as you were talking earlier, the DNA was a big part of it. But also the stories of these young people. I mean, I'd heard some of them, but I hadn't heard all of them. I was like, holy crap. Like, this is, how many is there? Like, how long can you hide these people? You can't.
Well, just send me the link so it reminds me, because I've got so many presentations.
Yeah, I do.
So I'll go back to that one, and at least I'll know what.
So do you put those together to go on shows like this, or do you put them together like for...
I do them for conferences
Okay.
if there's a certain focus, but I have done many presentations on interviews.
Okay.
If somebody says, I'd like an overview, I've got all sorts.
Okay.
Focusing on the DNA right through to, all sorts.
I think that'd be a great idea. I thought it was a great presentation, and it gave me a bunch of ideas. I thought, well, I'll just start cutting pieces out of this and put something together, you know. But heck, if you're open to it, I'll send you a link, and I'll send you an email. We'll set something up, and thanks in advance for that. It's good seeing you. Good seeing you, and take care, and I'll see you in the ethers.
Take care. Always lovely to talk with you, Todd. Lots of love.
Thank you so much.